Hi, my name is Joe Halawani, and on today's episode of Halifax, I'll be reviewing an album by Thrice entitled Palms. Palms is the 10th album by the California post-hardcore band, and I feel like Thrice is a band that at this point doesn't need an introduction, but at the same time, I think it's more than necessary to give them one. Early on, they started out as more of a punk and post-hardcore outfit, and I feel like they really solidified that sound on their third album, The Artist in the Ambulance, and it felt like they took that sound as far as it could have gone. And unlike most bands in that scene, most bands in that post-hardcore kind of screamo or heavier punk vibe kind of tended to stay in a very similar formula going down the road, and I feel like Thrice knew that the follow-up to that album was going to be the make or break of their career, and it definitely was a huge make for them. Visu is the album I'm talking about, which is their fourth. Saw them dabbling into more experimental rock, even more progressive rock, like ambient, using intricate piano pieces, synthesizers. They had a lot more to offer on that album, and it's unlike anything I've heard in the post-hardcore genre. So when I heard that album, as I became a fan when I was younger, I realized that they were something special, that they had something more to offer, and that they were unlike any band I've heard in that scene of music. So from that point, they got a little more experimental on the follow-up to Visu, which is a 4 EP series called The Alchemy Index, which saw them separating it by their 4 EPs by the elements: earth, fire, water, and air. So from that point, it showed them doing the heavier side of their sound with post-hardcore, writing more ballads, somber pieces, acoustic, and even some straightforward rock songs. And I feel like after that, they kind of realized that they were, vastly experimental. So I felt like they wanted to condense that, and it feels like they did on the follow-ups to that to those EPs, which are the albums Beggars and Major Minor. On those 2 records, I feel that they kind of narrowed their sound down into a very, I would say, 90s alternative rock influenced sound, while still incorporating maybe some of the elements of the Alchemy Index. It felt like a good continuation, but it felt more cohesive, felt more put together, more thematic, and I was very interested in where they were going to go next from that point. Unfortunately, after 2011's Major Minor, the band went on hiatus for about 5 years. They played a few small shows in between that time, but they weren't officially back until 2016's To Be Everywhere Is To Be Nowhere. On that record, I found Thrice going for an even more straightforward, but instead of it didn't feel as 90s influence, it just felt like more of a modern day hard rock album. And not to say it doesn't really, it's catchy, it's melodic, it's hooky. I don't think it necessarily sounds derivative of anything else, but it really was a great comeback record. In most cases, when bands do comeback records, it usually does not gain kind of traction or radio play like it did in the case of Thrice, especially on songs like Hurricane and Black Honey. In compare to compare that to, the album charted very well, the songs charted well, they got radio play like they never had before. Even though they used to be on Island Records, it went to Vagrant from there. It didn't matter, what label they were on. I guess they had, something good going for them at that time. So which brings us now to 2018's Palms. On this album, I think Thrice were very excited to be back. I think that it was only 2 years since, so it must have been rejuvenating for them to be back together, to feel comfortable writing songs together again. And I believe that with this album, I feel like they wanted to ride that wave of success a little more. Not to completely, make it sound like it was disingenuous or anything like that. I'm just saying that it seems like they, tried to be more melodic, show more sides of them this time around, instead of kind of just having this one, unit of sound. Which brings me into the first single from the album, entitled The Gray. This song starts off with just absolutely raucous drum fill that brings in this driving guitar hook. It's one of the most infectious moments on the album. Even though the chorus on the song might not be the most unique you've ever heard in your life, it's still very melodic, very catchy, and it was definitely a great single. It is by far one of the strongest moments on the record. This was then followed by the second single, Only Us. And with Only Us, I feel like it was a different direction for the band. They don't normally incorporate a very, melodic synthesizer as a lead, as an intro to a song, as far as, because I feel like what they did with that piano piece or synthesizer piece was that it definitely was served as the intro, but it definitely guided the song all the way through. So it was interesting to see. I feel like I can compare that to maybe Muse's more recent dabblings in electronic music. It doesn't feel too far off, at least from maybe like something like Imagine Dragons would do, as far as just the piano piece, not the structure of the song, to say. But as much as I like this song, I found it to be an interesting direction. I find the song to be hit or miss, but I do enjoy it, and I do find it to be one of the more impactful moments on the album. The third single before the album's release is the track The Dark. This one, I felt like, has a very growing feel to it. Like when it starts out, it builds up. It definitely creates momentum, and it really, I feel like I love where I thought the song might have gone, but I feel like the chorus kind of takes a very slow dip. Like it felt like it built up, and then it kind of just had a very weaker. It was just a very strange transition. I feel like it was just very brought down to this very moody and slow ambient chorus instead of basically upping up the hype, so to speak, from that point. But lyrically, I do love the concept. It definitely is dealing with politics, and it's basically saying that as citizens or people who feel oppressed or feel that they don't agree with what's going on, simply that we are not going to sit in the dark anymore. We are going to rise up, we are going to revolt, react, and protest, and challenge corruption. And I'm totally all for that. I find that to be an incredible message to be spreading in these trying times. So, despite me not loving the chorus, I do love the message, and the song is really a great testament to Thrice's songwriting, how they can be so emotive and captivating. I don't think the chorus is bad. It just felt like an odd transition to me. That's all I felt from it. So those were the three singles that led into it, and even though they aren't in that order, those are the first three songs that start off the album. It begins with Only Us, going into The Gray, which goes into The Dark. Now, I think that the album definitely starts off very strong, especially when it goes into the next song, which is probably my favorite from the record, entitled Just Breathe. What I like about Just Breathe a lot is that even though I don't really feel like Thrice doesn't try to dive back into older sounding material, even though from time to time they'll make references to older material in their lyrics, I don't feel like they do that stylistically. And this doesn't feel like... It feels like a refreshing take, or it felt like it could have been a continuation of where they were going with the major minor material. It definitely sounds like it had a very similar feel to it, and I enjoyed that a lot. But other than that, I do find the song to be very melodic, very hooky, very enjoyable. The lyrics, I feel, deal with anxiety. The chorus goes as "just breathe, stay in the moment." So it definitely feels like it's just trying to tell you to alleviate yourself from any difficulty you may be dealing with. Try to calm down. Don't overreact. Simply just breathe. And upon when I first listened to the album, I feel like that song stood out to me the most as a longtime fan of the band. So even though I think the album starts off very strongly with these, uplifting and powerful rock tracks, I feel like the album loses its focus pretty much midway through to the end. The fifth song on the album, I believe, is called "Everything Belongs," and that song to me feels like something that band The Fray could have wrote in like 2004. It just reminds me of that piano pop rock thing that a lot of bands were doing around that time, like The Fray, like The Script, One Republic, or even early Coldplay, for instance. But the message is just trying to unify people, basically saying everything belongs. It seems just like, I feel like the lyrical content for the message it's trying to portray could have been more evocative, could have been more descriptive, could have not used so many cliches. So I feel like for that reason, I don't really buy what the song was trying to achieve. However, it does feel like a little rehashed and a little, it just doesn't feel as original as a Thrice ballad usually is. So that's something I didn't enjoy about this album, were the ballads. This then goes into the song "My Soul," which I feel like is another one of those just somber, moody pieces. And I feel like there was just nothing memorable about that track. It's like I have the same problem with it as I do with "Everything Belongs," in that it just was not memorable. It feels like something that's already been done, and not necessarily in a better way either. So I didn't really care for that. This then leads me into I could have the track listing order wrong, but it leads me into what I think is the absolute worst song I've ever heard by this band, and this is the shameless "Hold Up a Light." "Hold Up a Light" sounds like Thrice trying to be like every post-grunge band that has been on the radio for the last 20 years. It sounds like in essence, it's basically a band following old trends that rely on riding the coattails of successful artists in a genre that helped popularize it, except without adding anything fresh to it that made it unique or influential in the first place. So it seems like a ripoff of a ripoff, to put it simply, and it's just very unabashed. Like, it's clear that Thrice were going for a very, very generic, mainstream, radio rock appeal with this song. The entire chorus is literally Dustin saying "hold up a light," a 4-word phrase repeatedly. I don't know what on earth the appeal of this song would be. I don't know how they felt like they had, like a light bulb moment with that song to to not even make that pun. I didn't even realize, but I just don't understand. I mean, I get what they were going for. I just think it was poorly executed. Especially when you see a band as unique and diverse and talented as Thrice, dumbing down their sound to this extent to appeal to the masses. It's like they had more to offer. They've written catchier songs. They've written, more hooky and impactful songs without having to repeat the same lyrics. And that's another takeaway from this album. I feel like as much as a band can write a chorus, I feel like I'd never seen this band reiterate the same choruses or the same phrases or not have as many lyrics in their songs to have it be that repetitive. So I feel like in that regard, it's another obvious, pretty much another obvious sense of that's what they were trying to accomplish with that. So I've never felt embarrassed listening to a Thrice song. I'll pretty much leave it at that. But the next song on the album definitely, helped me kind of regain, kind of regain some, kind of regain some faith in the band for the rest of this album as I was sitting through it, which is the song "A Branch in the River." This song is probably like my top next to Just Breathe. It starts off with this very muddy, distorted bass line into this just menacing riff, and it's the most aggressive moment on the album. It's the heaviest song on the album for sure, and the chorus is the most striking. I feel like without it, without having to be, even though it does repeat itself, it definitely has more room to breathe. It definitely has more space between it than other moments do that feel so, forcefully connected. So this one, I feel like, is not only a standout, it achieved, I feel like it achieved things, that other songs were trying to achieve on the album or that they had in mind to kind of get to, and that this song is one of the, most praising moments of the album. Then the songs kind of take, I feel like they go back, the album takes a weird direction by going from those four heavy songs that started off to those two kind of weaker ballads to go into these two other, straight ahead rock songs. And then it went back, the album ends with the two ballads. The first one being, which is the 9th track on the album, is Blood on Blood. I feel like this was a better representation of the slow burners on the album. It definitely opens up with these gorgeous acoustic tones. You even hear some harp later, some harp in the song later. So I do enjoy that song a lot. I feel like the lyrics deal with religion. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but he talks about, like picking up an old book and trying to interpret its meaning. To me, I just feel like I get a biblical sense from that, even though that may not be what it is. I feel like that's what it could possibly portray if the meaning was if the lyrical content was open-ended intentionally. So I feel like Blood on Blood was definitely a better take at what they were stabbing at, with the sense of balladry that takes the midsection of this album. But I feel like the greatest moment that they achieved with writing a ballad is the album's closer, Beyond the Pines. Now I feel like this was the moment where I'm like, okay, Thrice still has a general sense of what they want to do in albums. This song kind of took me back to other album closers like Red Sky or Beggars. Because it definitely felt more thematic. It definitely felt more expansive. It felt like it had a lot more to say. There was more transitions than the other ballads on the album. And it definitely is a very somber and melancholic, yet uplifting. And I feel like that's been a very common theme of this album. Like, we may be in the dark, but we don't want to sit in the dark anymore. So I do enjoy that sentiment. I think it's a good message. So overall, I feel like Thrice didn't know what they wanted to do with this album other than just experiment. And while trying to experiment, trying to ride the wave of the commercial success of their last album. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. Like I said, the first 4 songs definitely kick it off very well, but it's misleading. I feel like just the midsection towards the end is very off-balanced. However, the songwriting structure is here, the dynamic is here, the melodies are here. I just feel like this album might have been rushed, especially considering it's been only 2 years since their last album, so maybe they felt an eagerness to strike the pan while it's hot kind of thing. So I can maybe understand it in that sense or regard, but otherwise it feels unfocused, even though there's definitely a lot of things to praise about this album. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. That's where I feel it lies. They could have sharpened these ideas a little more. Could have gave them more attention, more detail, more nuance. So that's why I feel that, despite me thinking some of the songs here are some of the most captivating they've ever written, it's surrounded by an unsure direction stylistically. So that's why I'm going to rate it where I did. So that is pretty much it. Thank you for listening. I will see you on the next episode of Halifax. Thank you.